Hi, I'm Dr. Arlen Ford, the founder and chairman of Activator Methods International. And today I have an old friend that we're interviewing. I've known for many years. He's famous in the talk radio world. And so we're going to find out all about that. And Dr. Bob Martin is his name, and he is a syndicated radio host. And we're going to learn more about that as we go. Good afternoon, Dr. Martin. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Arlen? Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, and same to you. Now, Dr. Martin lives in Hawaii, so he says the weather is really good the year round, and so he doesn't have any of the snowstorms and other hurricanes that we have here in the U.S. That's probably why you moved. But anyway, tell me, Bob, a little bit about how you became a chiropractor.
Well, some people say, well, how did you find chiropractic? I think basically chiropractic found me. And the way that it found me is that at the age of 15, I started working at a grocery store in Davenport, Iowa, which is my home city, and Iowa is the state. My sister was the head cashier at a grocery store, and she knew that at age 15, I was starting to become interested in cars and girls. And so I wanted to find some money so that when I did turn 16 years of age, I could buy a car. And there in the state of Iowa, you could not work until you were 16 in this particular store. So she went to the store manager and said, I have a little brother who wants to work in this store, but he can't because he's not 16 yet. Is there anything else he can do to earn money? And the store manager said, well, let me check, got back to her and said, yes, as long as he stays in the back room and we'll get a job for him, he can work at the store. And so what I did in the back of this grocery store in Davenport, Iowa, I took these big boxes of frozen chicken and I stuffed them in other bags, put them in a grocery cart, and then they tagged them and put them out on to the shelves. And I did that for a year. And during that year that I was working, I had been sick my entire life, Arlen, with asthma and bronchitis and eczema and sinusitis, all kinds of immune system problems. So I was one day in the break room eating, and this chiropractic student was in there, and he noticed over time that I had been out of work, calling in sick, constantly blowing my nose, sniffling, sneezing. And he said, what, have you always been like this? And I said, yeah, I've been like this my whole life. And he goes, well, that's not normal. What are you doing about it? And I said, well, my parents take me to a medical doctor. They give me antibiotics. They give me antihistamines. They give me all these drugs. And isn't this the way it's supposed to be? And he said, no, something else is wrong with you. Maybe it's your nervous system. And I said, what's that? And so what happened was eventually he talked me into lying down on these gigantic boxes of Charmin toilet paper that were in big boxes that were not yet out on the shelf of the grocery store. And he said, I'd like to examine you. Now, keep in mind, he's in clinic right now. He's not even licensed. He hasn't graduated from Palmer. So being as naive as I was, I said, yeah, well, what the heck? Go ahead. You seem like an honest person. He laid me down on the table, checked me out, and he goes, oh, you have some major problems in your neck. And that could be interfering with your immune system. That could be the reason why you're sick. And that needs to be taken care of. And I said, well, what do you mean taken care of? He said, well, I can take care of it right now if you like. I said, yeah, go for it. So he turned me over and felt my neck and was poking around in my neck and gave me an adjustment of my upper cervical area, my atlas. And it was like this loud, massive cracking in my neck. And I got up off the table. I was actually a little lightheaded, but I just felt like there was just something changing in my system. And so my head felt lighter, my body felt lighter. And over the next year, he continued to treat me in the back room of this grocery store. And my asthma cleared up, my sinus problems went away, my eczema went away. And I hadn't been, and now all of a sudden my parents are saying, hey, why aren't you sick anymore? And we're not having to every 6 weeks go to this doctor and get more drugs. I was hospitalized like 3 or 4 times with walking pneumonia. And suddenly I'm getting well. And everybody's noticing it around me. And this particular chiropractor said, well, after about a year of this, I was just getting ready to turn 16. He said, well, you know, you ought to consider, what are you going to do after high school? And I said, well, I'm going to go to work for J.I. Case or Caterpillar, because there's a lot of industry there in Davenport, Iowa. That's where I was going with the rest of my friends. And so he said, you know what? You've had a miracle. Your nervous system was blocked. Getting chiropractic adjustments turned you around, and now you're healthy and you should become a doctor. And I said, me become a doctor? I'm barely flunking out of high school because I'm never there sick. They're just pushing me through with D- through high school. And he said, well, you know what? I would like to set up a meeting with the registrar over at Palmer College of Chiropractic and just take you over there and sit down with them and tell them your story and see if they can do something for you. Now, Arlen, at the time, they were phasing in the pre-college that you needed to get into chiropractic school, the 2 years of prerequisite.
Yes.
So you had to have some, liberal arts. Well, I sat down and the guy said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, well, and he goes, how's your grades? And I go, I wish you wouldn't have asked me that. My high school grades are horrible. And he goes, I'll tell you what, your story is unique and we will start you out, even though we're phasing this in, but it's going to be a hard schedule at first. And those classes that we had to take in conjunction with Palmer Chiropractic College were integrated with Palmer Junior College. So we had to take English and terminology and all these other classes. He said, if you can get through that the first quarter, we'll start you into the regular curriculum at Palmer Chiropractic College. And it was tough. I was actually 17 years old when I started Palmer College. I was 1 year out of high school and I was still 17. I turned 18 in a couple months, but that's sort of how I got started in chiropractic. And it was a rough go in the beginning because I didn't know how to study or anything. And then finally I caught on and things became fun for me.
Yes. Well, it sounds like a familiar story because I kind of went through that same thing. I was sick and I went into the chiropractor with my mother and she said, I wish there was something you could do with this 12-year-old. And 6 adjustments later, my sore throat's left and all of the upper stuff I had in my respiratory system, just like you. So now when you get out of school, where did you go to practice?
I started in practice in Denver, Colorado in 1976. Within literally a few weeks of graduating, I think I was like 20 at the time.
Yes.
Just getting ready to turn 21. And there I was in Denver, I'd taken the board, I passed the board and was looking for something. I was headed actually for New Mexico. I actually had an offer down in Raton, New Mexico with a chiropractor who I was going to be his associate and run one of his offices, but I still didn't have a New Mexico license. He said, come on down, I'll help you get your license. Well, on the way down there, I went to a phone booth because I already had a Colorado license and I called into the Chiropractic Association and said, are there any associateships available? And they go, yeah, there's a chiropractor, there's an emergency. He's going into an alcohol rehab and his associate left. And so there's this office. They just want somebody to come in and take it over. It's only been open 6 months. So I went over there, talked to the fellow, and they had one active patient in 6 months. And I said, all right, well, what do you have? And everything was in place. The tables, there was an x-ray machine back there. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. And so we signed papers and I started right there in Denver.
Well, what did you do then to draw people to you?
Well, I became part of the Chiropractic Association of Colorado. The president of the association, we used to have luncheons and we got together and they wanted to try to help educate the public there in Colorado. And we had heard that Dr. Chester Wilk from Chicago, from the famed antitrust suit, he was now starting to teach what are called Speakers Bureau courses around the United States. And so the association bought his entire cassette tape program. We received it. We started listening to it. And then we invited him to come to Colorado to actually teach us up in the mountain courses where we'd go up there and we would play devil's advocate. One of us would play the MD, trying to defame chiropractic, and the other would defend chiropractic. And we went back and forth with these meetings. He kept coming back out. And it really gave us a lot of confidence. And then we finally got a radio show. We purchased some time on a radio show there in Denver, and we took turns becoming guests on this show. and I was a guest. And I mean, it was really traumatic for me because I had never given a lecture. I'd never talked to, groups or anything, and to be on the radio was very scary. So I did. It felt good afterwards. And we kept doing that. And we started to notice there were patients that were coming into the office as a result of those broadcasts, which really excited me. And then ultimately I went and got my own radio show on like a Christian station, bought and purchased time. And then ultimately somebody heard me on the radio, and a lady that called my office one night, she was setting up a new talk station in Denver. And I met her in my office at like 3 a.m. She had heard her back moving down from Portland, Oregon to set this station up. And she saw a sign in my waiting room that I had a radio show. And she said, well, I'll listen to your radio show. We're just setting up a radio station here. And she listened to it, and she came into the office for another visit after I treated her. And she goes, well, I listened to your show, and we may be interested in having you come over to our station. I notice you're on 1 hour now, but we need a 2-hour show. And I said, well, hold on. I can barely afford to pay for the 1 hour on radio. She goes, no, we need you for 2 hours, and we'll pay you to do it. And I said, oh, that works for me.
The start of your radio career.
That's exactly how it started. It started over there with 2 hours, downtown Denver at the top of the Tabor Center, and with Sandusky newspaper, who owned this radio station. And we went from 2 hours, we sold out advertising, expanded to 3 hours, expanded to 4 hours, and they wanted to do 5 hours on Saturday. And I was practicing the whole time through the week, and then doing this on the weekends.
And so is it true that the Colorado Medical Association or establishment tried to remove you from providing consumer education?
Oh, big time. Big time. In fact, I knew you were going to ask me that. And so I still have the letters here that they wrote this campaign to the Denver Post, the Rocky Mountain News. They did everything they can. This is from the American Cancer Society, the Denver Medical Society, the Colorado Medical Society, the Arthritis Society. They put a campaign together to get this quack by the name of Dr. Bob Martin off the air, because he was telling people to go to chiropractors. He was telling people to exercise more often. He was telling his listeners to eat a better diet and try to lower their stress. And they didn't like it. These letters basically say, this guy's killing people. He's a menace. You need to get him off the radio. Well, the good news is that the general manager of this radio station that I was working for at the time and the program director had become patients of mine. They had all kinds of health problems that got cleared up. So every nasty letter that went to them, they wrote back and said, hey, he's not coming off the air. And what you should do if you really have some kind of an argument with him is call him up, take him on, argue with him, or go in and be a guest on his show. Of course, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to do all the stuff behind the scenes to try to get me off the air. And it emboldened me, Arlen, to continue to do this.
When did you start using Activator in your practice?
I believe that was in the early 80s. I think that's when we first met at the Denver Stapleton Airport Hotel out there. Yes. And that was my very first Activator seminar that I took. And I've been using it, frankly, ever since. Total miracle, completely changed my practice in so many ways that I can't even express my gratitude for that.
Now, you moved from Denver to Arizona. Why did you do that?
Well, this radio show that I was doing was highly successful. I was working for this corporation. They had radio stations all over the country. So I went to the general manager and I said, look, if this is working in a test market in Denver and we're sold out and we can't even keep up with it, why don't you roll my program out in a national way? Now, remember, this is in the 70s, the mid to late 70s. And so they went to this corporate person and said, yeah, we'd love to do it. But a lot of our advertisers are drug companies. So that wouldn't fly on a national basis. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, you just don't have the credential to do that. And I said, well, what do you suggest? I said, this show is very popular and it would work in other markets. And they go, well, you know what? If you had an MD, we would do that in a heartbeat. I said, well, have an MD. I would never practice as an MD. I'm a chiropractor. So what I did, I figured out in order to advance the whole purpose of me getting out the message of what I do, chiropractic, lifestyle medicine, all of it, I sold my practice to my brother, and I went to medical school in the Caribbean after I applied for medical schools in the United States. And once they found out I was a chiropractor and I was already in practice for years, they said, and had 5 or 6 children, they said, we don't think so. So I ended up going to an English-speaking foreign medical school in Grenada, West Indies, and I enrolled in that. And same thing happened as soon as I started in school. All the teachers were up at my house getting care, all the professors, and they were from Harvard and Penn State and all these guys that were coming in just doing classes for a semester and then living on the beach and then going back to the United States. And finally, my children were suffering because there were no schools there that were worth anything going to. And so my child that was in 2nd grade was in the same class as my child that was in the 7th grade. And finally, after seeing that and they're being damaged by that, I said, honey, I got to find another way to do this besides going through this. So I was in medical school for about a year. And so we decided to move away from that and go back to the United States and find another way to get a nationally syndicated show. Luckily, I did. I moved to Arizona because I couldn't go back to Colorado because my brother now had that practice and I didn't want to interfere with that. And so we moved to Arizona. And I met somebody and that had a small syndicated program, and I went and I substituted for them when they were on vacation. And then finally, this person just wanted to give up. And so I took over that show, and that show led to another expansion. And ultimately, I got hired by iHeartMedia, and I was an employee until about 2 years ago for 28 years with iHeartMedia.
Wow.
And then my syndicated show has become really large and expanded, and we're in about 200 radio stations today all over the United States for 3 hours a week. And then I also do a standalone show on KTAR News there where you're at in Phoenix, Arizona.
That's a big station too. Covers
it is.
A lot of
covers
people.
the whole state.
Yes, covers the whole state. Well, you're famous in the radio talk world, and it took a lot of courage to hang in there in the early beginning to get, your feet into it, to find out how it worked and so forth. And how do you think that you managed to keep the faith?
Well, one, I was starving and my family depended on me, succeeding. And two, I have to give credit to the good Lord above and, of course, Chester Wilk. I mean, after that, it was like, and when I took his courses and read all his material, met with him, it was just a total turnaround for me. I said, yeah, I don't care. I'll go on any radio station, any TV station. If some MD wants to debate or call in and find a way to, argue with me, I have no problem doing that now. However, I started to get patients into my practice from these radio shows, Arlen. I'm talking sick patients. I'm talking about cancer patients, people with autoimmune diseases, all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't typically see in a chiropractic practice. I had zero training in any other field like nutrition, lifestyle medicine. So I said, geez, I better find a way. I have to refer a lot of these patients out to the holistic DOs and MDs in town. I said, well, maybe I can help them somehow. So I went back and did a diplomate program, a DACPIN program, through the ACA, did a 3-year program there. I also went and did a diplomate program with the A4M, which is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. So I built my knowledge base on lifestyle medicine to integrate that with the chiropractic. And it was all about diet and exercise. And I went through an acupuncture training as well. And that's what kind of gave me the confidence to say, okay, I can do this and I can field these questions from all these different angles. And if I don't know it, I'll just make something up.
Well,
just kidding on that.
I remember, several years ago when I was on a show with you for something. I don't know, we were doing something and you wanted us to talk about it. But I have known you as a nutritionist. I mean, that's the way I have known you. And that's what I think, you hit the right spots because the public you're way ahead of your time. Now RFK is coming out, with all of the new things at natural health and everything for the correct food and all that kind of thing. And if you go on, I had a patient here not long ago that came in and said they were trying to get their blood sugar lowered. And so they went on the internet and they found all kinds of different things. And they said, is there anything better? And I said, listen to Bob Martin's show. And I don't know, have you ever found anything naturally for lowering blood sugar? Because that seems to be a big thing today because there's so many diabetics out there.
It's huge. It's huge. About two-thirds of the entire population in the United States, Arlen, are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. 2/3. Wrap your head around that one.
Wow.
So it's epidemic right now. It's epidemic. And it's a combination of things. We're talking about type 2 diabetes, which,
yes,
that's what we're talking about. It used to be called adult onset. Well, we can't call that anymore because kids are getting it at an early age. So, yes, there's lots. You have to get back into an exercise pattern because without exercise, nothing else is going to work because it's all about your metabolism slowing down, the receptor sites becoming insulin resistant, having dysinsulinism or metabolic syndrome. And once you start exercising, along with proper diet and avoiding the simple carbohydrates, the fast-acting carbohydrates, and then you integrate with that the right nutrients, which includes chromium and zinc and B-complex vitamins and botanicals that can absolutely solve the problem, like bitter melon and alpha lipoic acid. There's so much to do for diabetics. It is easy to shut down the progression of a diabetic cold and reverse it. We know how to do it today. There's no question about it.
Well, that's a big thing. I mean, when 2/3 of the country is suffering from it, think of the metformin they're taking.
Exactly. The side effects with these drugs, and there are a lot of drugs that are certainly effective at lowering blood sugar, metformin being one of them. And by the way, that particular drug was originally found in a plant, in a botanical. About 40% of the drugs on the market today come from the botanical kingdom, and then eventually they're synthesized, metformin being one of them, called goat rue, which has been used historically for a long time, and they studied that, and then they, of course, synthesize it, and they pull it through like that. So there's a lot you can do, and I think the chiropractor can absolutely be at the forefront of this. I mean, if 2/3 of the population is pre-diabetic or diabetic, that's our population, that's our demographic, and why shouldn't we be able to counsel them about exercise? It's part of our training. And counsel them about nutrition. I had some nutrition in chiropractic college way back in the 70s. It's expanded now, and you can get these 3-year diplomate programs if you choose to expand your practice. So why shouldn't we do that for our patients so that they may not have to go on drugs and can avert the possibility of all the harsh side effects associated with pharmacologic agents?
I'd like to know how my listeners here today can, get you on syndicated radio and, people watching the podcast if they want to contact you, because I'm sure there are people out there saying, wow, I'm looking for somebody to lower my glucose. And so what's the contact?
Well, they can go to my website. A lot of content there at drbob.com, spelling out the word doctor, drbob.com. And if a colleague wants to send me an email, happy to respond. My email address is, I would use the R for Robert, R Martin, Martin, the number 2 at outlook.com. rmartin2 at outlook.com. They can send an email.
Well, what we'll do is we'll put that on the screen. I'll have my producers here put that on the screen when we hang up, and then that will be coming out so people can find out how to get a hold of you and, find some of that wisdom out. So I can't thank you. I know you're a busy guy, and to be on the podcast, I really appreciate it. And so thank you very much, my friend, and we'll look forward to talking to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been an honor to be on your show.
And please feel free to to share this podcast with your people, because, sometimes they want to know about what chiropractors do, and this is a good chance for them to learn.
Perfect. Thank you. I will.
Thank you.